Why is it that a high-flying Harvard-educated executive can lose everything, while a janitor, who never earned more than a modest wage, can die with $8 million in the bank? If money were a hard science, like physics or chemistry, this would be impossible. In physics, the rules don't care about your mood or your childhood trauma. Gravity works the same for everyone. But in the world of finance, we've been lied to. We've been told that investing is about spreadsheets, data points, and complex algorithms. Morgan Housel, in his transformative book, The Psychology of Money, argues the exact opposite. He suggests that doing well with money has very little to do with how smart you are, and a whole lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. We spend so much time looking at the what of money, the stocks, the bonds, the interest, rates, that we completely ignore the why behind our own erratic decisions. Imagine you're standing in a massive, crowded casino. To your left, there are people betting their life savings on a single roll of the dice. To your right, there are people so terrified of losing a penny that they're hiding their cash under the floorboards. Most of us are somewhere in the middle, but we're all operating based on a unique set of internal maps that were drawn long before we even opened our first bank account. This is the core framework of Housel's philosophy. He posits that no one is actually crazy when it comes to money. We all just make decisions based on our own unique experiences that make sense to us in the moment. If you grew up during the Great Depression, you view the stock market very differently than someone who grew up during the tech boom of the 90s. This brings us to the first major pillar of the book, the relationship between luck and risk. Housel tells us to look at the world as a giant, chaotic pinball machine. When things go well, we call it skill. When things go poorly, we call it risk. But in reality, luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. Think about Bill Gates. He attended one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer in 1968. That was a 1 in a million stroke of luck. But for every Bill Gates, there's a Kent Evans, Gates's brilliant childhood friend who had the same skills and the same ambition, but died in a mountaineering accident before he could graduate. That was a 1 in a million stroke of risk. The lesson Housel wants us to internalize is that nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. When you're judging your own financial failures or someone else's success, you have to account for the invisible hand of chance. This realization isn't meant to be discouraging. It's meant to make you more humble when things are going right and more forgiving when they go wrong. Now, let's pivot to the most powerful force in the financial universe, compounding. But here's the twist. Housel doesn't talk about it like a math teacher. He talks about it like a historian. Imagine a massive glacier carving out a valley. It doesn't happen because of a single violent storm. It happens because of a tiny bit of snow that doesn't melt in the summer, which then catches more snow the next year and the year after that. This is exactly how Warren Buffett built his fortune. Most people think Buffett is a genius investor, and he is, but his real secret is time. Out of his nearly $90 billion net worth, over $80 billion of it came after his 65th birthday. If he had started investing in his 30s and retired in his 60s, you'd probably never have heard of him. The book emphasizes that the goal isn't to be the best investor with the highest returns. It's to be the investor who can stay invested for the longest period without being forced to quit. This leads us to a third, and perhaps more uncomfortable, theme, the concept of enough. There's a story in the book about a billionaire who has everything but risks it all on a shady deal because he wants even more. He didn't need the money, but he risked what he did need for something he didn't need. It's like a person who is full after a massive meal, but continues to eat until they're physically ill. Housel argues that the hardest financial skill is getting the goalposts to stop moving. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with images of people who have more than us. But if you don't have a sense of enough, you will eventually reach a point where you break. Whether it's your reputation, your freedom, or your family, there are things that are never worth risking, no matter the potential gain. Wealth, as the author defines it, is actually what you don't see. It's the cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, and the first-class tickets not booked. Wealth is the option value of money that hasn't been spent yet. It's the freedom to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today. But how do we handle the inevitable chaos of the markets? Housel offers a refreshing perspective on volatility. Imagine you're planning a trip to Disneyland. You know before you go that the tickets are going to be expensive. You don't view the ticket price as a fine or a punishment. You view it as a fee for the experience. The psychology of money suggests we should view market crashes and volatility the same way. They aren't signs that you're doing something wrong. They are the fee you must pay for the chance to get higher returns over the long run. Most people see a 20% drop in their portfolio and feel like they're being fined by the universe for being greedy. If you can shift your mindset to see that drop as a volatility fee, you're much more likely to stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. Now, let's get into the critique. While Morgan Housel's work is arguably one of the most important finance books of the last decade, it isn't without its gaps. The book focuses heavily on the individual's mindset and behavior, which is empowering, but it occasionally glosses over the systemic barriers that make his advice harder to follow for the average person. For instance, he talks about the power of staying in the game, but staying in the game is much easier when you have a safety net. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, one stroke of risk, like a medical emergency, can knock them out of the game permanently, regardless of their mindset. Some critics might also argue that Housel's approach is a bit too conservative for those starting with very little. If you're playing catch-up, slow and steady might feel like a luxury you can't afford. However, the transformative power of the book lies in its ability to strip away the ego and the noise of the financial industry. It forces you to realize that you are often your own worst enemy. It's a critique of the hustle culture that tells us we need to be constantly trading and optimizing. Housel effectively argues that doing nothing is often the most productive thing you can do with your money. So, what's the final verdict? The Psychology of Money is not a book about how to get rich quick. It's a book about how to stay sane in a world that is obsessed with wealth. It's for the person who feels overwhelmed by the complexity of Wall Street and wants a philosophy that actually fits the messiness of real life. My personal opinion is that this should be required reading before anyone is allowed to open a brokerage account. It's the operating manual for the human brain that we never received. If you want an actionable step you can take today, try the end of the day test. Next time you're tempted to make a big purchase or a risky investment, ask yourself, will this help me sleep better at night? Or am I doing this to impress people I don't even like? Housel reminds us that reasonable is often better than rational. You don't need a perfect mathematical strategy. You just need a strategy that lets you stay the course when things get ugly. In a world full of experts shouting about the next big crypto coin or fall, the latest stock tip, Morgan Housel's voice is a calm, rational anchor. He reminds us that money is just a tool to buy back our time and our independence. Everything else is just noise. Thank you for staying through this chapter of our journey into the human mind and the markets. If you found this review helpful and want to dive deeper into the ideas that shape our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. See you in the next one.